I guess I first learned about Landmark through the local newspaper. I was teaching in the area at a local local private elementary school, the grammar school nearby. And I saw, it just was a big event that the Wyndham College campus was being reclaimed and that this school was coming in. Didn't know much about it. And I was finishing my time at the grammar school. My family was going through a change. My wife had gone back to school and studied to become a psychologist, and then she also was pregnant, and she graduated and then gave birth. And so I left my teaching work and became a house husband for a year, and she came to work here as one of the first counselors. And so in the first year. And so I kind of knew about it at that point. And I got involved with the college before I even started working here in two ways. One is that there was a tradition that came from the Landmark School that continued here, is that every Friday afternoon at the end of the workday there was a basketball game. And I started getting involved with that. I'd come up and drop off our little baby with my wife, who was finishing up her work week, and I would go play basketball, which was my reward, I guess. And the college was also going through talking about starting a daycare center. And so we thought that would be great, and I started attending meetings with that, and then became one of the prime movers of that, along with Christy Herbert and Tom and Linda Casiba. And a year later, after kind of finishing my stint at home, felt as if it would be good. I interviewed for a position, and at that point, Landmark started a daycare center. My daughter was, along with Adam DeLessio, was one of the founding children, the first to go through, and so I started working here.
I had been working at another private school in New Hampshire, and wanted a change, and was looking in the newspaper. Just looked in the Keene Sentinel, I think, and saw an ad. And at that point, I wasn't sure I wanted to continue teaching, but I saw an ad and it seemed interesting, and I came for an interview with Jim Bauckham, and I got lost on the way over. I ended up in Alsted and all over the place. Well, I was dropping my husband off in Alsted, but anyway, so I was interested in a change, but just after meeting Jim and Steffi Booth, and they were very nice and assured me that it would be a good situation, and it seemed like an interesting challenge. Well, probably, but it wasn't, there wasn't a program for them. I was at a private school, and several of the students definitely, in retrospect, learning about dyslexia, working at Landmark, I thought, yes, those young men had dyslexia, probably. But at the school where I was teaching before here, there was not a program for them.
My experience is almost exactly like Jan's, working in a private school, which I think sometimes families will reach out to that kind of environment. They get some individualized attention for their kids. So yes, I had some work with students like that, but not much formal training or support. Actually, I got hired at the grammar school because they had a need for that, and I guess I was seen as someone who could be helpful or effective. But it wasn't until I came to Landmark that I really came to understand what it meant. Well, it was exciting. I was really impressed by coming here after I had been teaching for about 7 years, kind of beginning of my career. And one thing that Landmark was all about was really best practices. There was just so much thought that seemed to have go into it. They didn't seem to be particularly looking for people who had a lot of background with learning disabilities, but they wanted people who had teaching backgrounds and so I fit that place. And I was just so impressed with my training, and I felt like I just went from I guess a good teacher to a really good teacher, just because they seem to have codified a sense of approach and a set of practices that were intuitive to me, that I had run into experience in growing with, but it just really advanced that and kind of put it together as a package for me that really just made so much sense. So I was very enthusiastic and excited about coming here as a teacher. I mean, the facilities and the situation was all new, so it wasn't too much, I guess, impressive that way, but it didn't matter. I mean, the ability to work with students in the depth that we were able to do was really profound.
Well, it was really intense. We had a week of orientation in the summer. I began in the summer program, and going from knowing very little about learning disabilities to, and I had never really I had one education class. I majored in English, got a master's in English, and we had a teaching methods course for teaching composition. But I learned how to teach spelling, how to teach reading, not all in 1 week, but I learned the foundations, and I learned the study skills, principles, and new ways of really structuring teaching writing. And it was a very intense week. I remember going home and poring over books and handouts and so on. But the training continued as we taught. We had close supervision with a number of great people, and a lot of structure, and ongoing trainings, just about every week, or very maybe monthly. I don't know, but they were pretty frequent.
Well, I think I may have covered it before, just in how it was all kind of put together and thought through. Mm-hmm. And my experience is, as Janice describes, very similar. Just the ongoing support. We had this system where you would be matched up with a student as a tutor, and that student was also matched up with an advisor who was also your supervisor. And so this kind of triangle relationship was just really, helpful. That advisor really knew that student, so you actually had someone else to talk to and to help you, guide you. And that advisor was a very experienced, often quite inspirational person to be able to work with. I don't know about you, but Chad Drake was part of our week-long training, and I think I was the last training group to have him because he was becoming elderly, and I don't believe he came up here much more after that. Chad Drake. So we had these really rigorous, intensive sessions during this week-long training, and then the one afternoon we met with Chad Drake, and he as someone with learning disabilities, he was a little, how do I put this? He didn't necessarily follow a clear sequence, but everything he had to say was like, wow, that's really interesting, and he had such depth of experience. I also remember a time when he was visiting the campus besides the training, and he was meeting with some student leaders. And one student leader, I can't remember his name right now, it's not important, asked him, I always remember this, he said to Chad Drake, you describe dyslexia as a gift. And he goes, I think I can get that. I can understand it. But to me, sometimes it feels like a gift, like at Christmas, you're all excited. You come. Do you remember this?
Well, I think I could tell where you're headed.
It's Christmas. I'm all excited. I come down and I'm a little boy, and I'm racing. I'm tearing apart opening my package, and it's closed. So it's not necessarily. And so, of course, the point was it wasn't necessarily a gift you wanted. Exactly. But you could, it was helpful. It was good. So Chad was Chad liked that, I think. Chad, but my experience with Jim Oliver wasn't. I don't know if I had too much contact with him as a faculty member initially. It was a lot with Jim Bauckham and my supervisor, advisor, supervisor. I did meet with him on a one-on-one. He made an effort to get to know everyone, and it was a small school. Had some interactions with him creating the daycare center, and I have to credit him and Carolyn Oliver for their support of that. I mean, they really brought forward the idea, and they wanted to make that and make Landmark at that time a family-friendly place to be, and put a lot of support. But I also learned an important lesson from him through that process about institutional politics and how things work. Because I guess those of us who were creating the daycare center, we would get together, we'd have decisions, or we would kind of figure things out. And then different ones of us would sometimes go to him or talk to him about something. So he was hearing sometimes different variations or different stories. And he finally just stopped us and said, could you just speak with one voice? And that was really like, as a group working together, and for him as a manager, he just needed to know, for us to get our act together and then give him what he needed today. That's a nice little life lesson I learned from him.
And you were asking about early memories. I had a similar experience with Chad Drake coming to my training. The group I was with, I think 12 people. And I just remember thinking, what a jolly old gentleman he is. I think he had suspenders and a white or light-colored Oxford shirt that was kind of half tucked in. And he just gave us. He was just a good storyteller and an inspirational speaker. He spoke about being dyslexic and what that was like, and just growing up and experiences in school, and sort of opened a window to kind of empathy for students, which is really important, rather than seeing them as just disabled people, people with disabilities or problems, seeing them as whole people, and people who've been frustrated by the educational system that they've been in. And so it was really fascinating listening to him. And he was a very warm person. And Jim Oliver, I remember thinking, oh, this cool guy, that he was a liar and he quit being a liar to come to this school that, it's not even half the buildings, or several of the buildings aren't even open. I came in '87, and hearing the stories of how I think he told us at one of the meetings how they opened up the campus and actually rolled up their sleeves and did some of the physical work. And I was just really impressed by that kind of drive to do something for people with learning disabilities, and certainly for not a lot of money. And I was 27 when I came here, and so I was. Well, it was over a number of years, but I was an English teacher and a tutor, and one summer I was the acting English department chair, and I became a tutorial supervisor and advisor, and and then I became the coordinator of the Center for Teaching and Learning, which turned into the Writing Center, and then the Center for Academic Support. I did that for 9 years. I think that might be it. I didn't coach here, but we did have in the early days we had an extracurricular commitment as part of our jobs, and so we would do various things, from just informal activities, taking students canoeing or horseback riding. But I did act as a mentor to students who who were mentors at Kernhattan School. So there were a small group of faculty who, well, I guess we were sort of advisors, faculty advisors for these mentors, and that was a nice experience. And I also got involved in study abroad. So,
My talking about the extracurricular responsibilities that we have, because my first memory of that actually involves you.
Oh yeah?
Yeah, I came on, you'd already been here for a year, and so we planned an activity to take some students during the summer to the Bread and Puppet Festival
right.
up in Gloverville,
Yeah.
Vermont, which is this big extravaganza and very political, very progressive in its outlook. And so we took a van of students, and it was all day event. And crazy. And so I kind of looked at Jan a little bit about that, but it was a shock for our students to be out in the middle of nowhere and to experience this kind of alternative type of entertainment and this kind of the kind of hippie lifestyle that they encountered there. It was a cultural shock. And I think you and I were like, oh, this is great. And they were like, what are we doing here? Like they just landed from outer space.
Yeah.
I got some, it was always kind of hard to figure out how to do that extracurricular responsibility. Somebody mentioned to me, though, have them come over and stack wood at your house, which I did. We burned 4 cords of wood a year at my home. And so other faculty during that time would sometimes tease me because I would have work parties at my house. And students loved to do that, though, and it wasn't that big a deal. And they had to drive trucks and stack stuff, and we'd have a big feast afterwards. And it was actually quite nice, a lot of fun.
It must have been wonderful to see students in a different context.
That's right.
not just
And that was
in the
part of the
classroom.
purpose, the intention of doing that. I think we already had deep relationships fostered between the students that worked here. I mean, there even today, with all the students here, there are only about 20 or 30 that I know, but I know them really well. But that got even stronger with the extracurricular part, because the students who often would come to my home were students that already knew me and were in my classes or had me before. So that was a really great thing. I guess my other hats, and it was that we had lots of hats. We were generalists for the most part. I mean, I taught in the English department, taught in the study skills department, communications. I probably could have taught in the math department at that point, but not today, as we've become more specialized. And I did the advising, supervising role like you did, and I did study abroad like you have as well. So all things that I've enjoyed and I gained a lot from. Well, there's so many great teachers here at Landmark, but and there's some. I would point to them as a couple really great administrators, of leaders. I work with them both pretty closely, particularly Diane, because she was the person who really developed the communications department, of which I got involved with pretty early and have continued, of course, to make it into a career. Both of them were really inspirational. Both of them really dug in deep and really could accomplish things. With Diane, I could go and see her and get really immediate practical advice, like what to do now. I'd present a particular thing. But she also could think more broadly and be more visionary. And so she really did that with my department. And she really cultivated a whole kind of cadre of those of us who got involved with that and who still continue today. One of the things Diane was really helped impress upon us was that what we were doing here at Landmark was really special, really unique, and of value. And she really had us getting out and presenting at conferences. So I remember doing an early conference back in, I don't know, it must have been 1990 or something, with Diane and Joyce Klukin at a national conference. And then Diane went on to, after she worked with the communications department, she did public relations or promotional work here at the college, and was the prime mover with the opening gifts conferences that Landmark did, first up in Ascutney, Vermont, and then in Boulder or Snowmass, Colorado. And I participated in both of those. Those were amazing things where I would rub shoulders with some of the big people in the field of learning disabilities, like Daniel Amen and John Rady, Nancy Rady. I have dinner with them and be presenting, alongside with them, and it was just great. And Diane made all that happen, made those really powerful, successful events. And she really speaks to her vision and her ability to take on large challenges and see them through and make them really successful. She had a real sense of style as well. She didn't just do things, she did things. You're smiling. You see that?
Yeah, I can see her.
I can picture her too. I mean, I'm not someone who pays a lot of attention to my appearance, but she's someone who did, about her appearance at least. she was very classy, and the biggest thing, yeah.
Well, that was one of the things I remember was really important for her and Joyce was figuring out the outfits for the conference.
For those conferences. They'd have all these discussions like, I don't know what I'm wearing.
Wear?
But that was part for her around the kind of professionalism and the kind of how you present yourself, the communication issues around that. She had this thing in my department. At that point in time in the history of the world, this new fashion came into being for young people, and that was baseball caps. She hated those, and in part because she found it difficult when students would have their hats on and would put their heads down, and so there was this thing in our department where you could not wear a hat, baseball cap during class, which is kind of a unique little part of Diane, but
I think that spread to the whole community.
right, she taught us all something.
Yeah.
And now with my work with Jeroo, I work with her as an advisor supervisor, and I would meet with, and sometimes she would be my immediate supervisor in that situation, and we would work sometimes around some of the same students, and I would meet with her and the student, and I learned so much seeing how she worked with the student. She had little tolerance for evasiveness and ambiguity. She really could cut to exactly what was going on with that student, and they responded so much to that, so well to that. It was just. It's hard to. I try to do that myself to this day, and.
Yeah, she was very clear. She was very straightforward, and. She would have a piece of paper and her felt tip pen, and she would listen to students, but she wouldn't listen to, excuses or I wanted to say BS, but
yeah, I know,
she would just not hear about kind of blaming others or not taking responsibility or making excuses, and she would. The meetings were very efficient. She would listen for a while, and then she would say, "Okay, I want you to do this, this, and this," and she would write things down. But she would say, "Can you do this? Can you do this?" And of course, the student would say yes, or she would try to set some high, some goals, some concrete goals. You're going to do this, this, and this. You're going to call me at 8 o'clock in the morning, and very clear. And I think students appreciated that because she provided them structure, and it was straightforward, and they knew what she expected from them, and it was good modeling for me because I tend to be a little wishy-washy and indecisive, and as an advisor it was just helpful. She would always support me when I had to solve a problem around a student, something difficult, even with even with eating disorders or with, chronic absences. She would just really help me solve those problems, and but always really holding students accountable, which was very important.
She followed through.
Yeah, she did.
I mean, it's one thing to troubleshoot with a student and make a list, but then she never forgot.
Yeah, and they knew she would be expecting these subsequent steps or check-ins, and they would often follow through. And if they didn't, that was the way it was, and they were maybe going to be suspended or whatever. she didn't give them guilt trips or anything like that. She would just say, okay, that's the way it is, and you come back another semester and try something different. But it was very clear. She was very clear. And fun, too. I mean, it sounds like all
I know.
serious
She had a great
business,
sense
so
of
she
humor.
could be serious. But she sometimes she would set out these requirements for the students, and they would say, okay, yeah, all right. And then they would leave, and the door would close, and we'd both just start laughing, just because, not irreverently, but just, wow, he really straightened up, or, so she had a fun side. She was a generous person, and sometimes had supervisors over for dinner, or other people over for dinner, and was just very
Known for
hospitable. Yeah.
Known for her spicy food.
Yeah, her good Indian food. And Diane, I didn't have as much contact with Diane as you did, but I really enjoyed her too. And definitely she had a sense of humor and was a jovial person. But in a way, like Jeroo was very straightforward too. Diane could be politic and, what's the word, discreet, and, but she also was usually very straightforward, I think.
Actually, yeah. I often felt Diane was the most powerful person on campus.
Yeah.
I mean, every institution
Real
has,
presence.
right, but that's part of it. Every institution has a certain hierarchy, and she was kind of in the middle of that. But she had her fingers in things that really made a difference all the way around. And in some small ways, and given that how small we were at that time, she ran the bookstore. She also did classroom placement. So as a teacher, and particularly since I was one of her acolytes, I guess, I knew that my materials would be in the bookstore and my students would be ready to go. I knew I would get the classroom that I wanted to go. In other words, and those are just some examples. She took on multiple roles. She wore those many different hats because she was so capable, and people would turn to her to be able to do things. And I think her influence was beyond that of her actual title. Well, it's complicated. It requires, as a teacher, that you're able to reach the students with certain language or processing difficulties while holding on to students who don't have that, who then, though, might be distracted, who may be impatient with the progress of their classmates. It's no different than the early days of teaching here, in that you are trying to be aware of everyone in the room. I mean, the thing I'm most grateful about in teaching students with learning differences is that it reminds me that everyone's an individual, and I can't think of someone as a type or a class as just a generalization. You have to do that. So I can't quickly summarize what kind of unique practices I have to perform to reach students with attentional issues. It did spur my early interest in technology, simply to create materials that were available for students on a 24/7 basis. So I just kind of got involved in creating websites and course websites, which that technology was out there for a while back in I'm talking about the late 90s. It was used mostly for businesses and services like that, not used so much in the educational field. But I always thought that would be useful for students who were having trouble in tracking materials or needed time to revisit materials. To have that kind of service. So that's one of the things that where I put my energy into and continue to build to today.
Well, I think of the word organization, and that used to be, even when we were dealing mostly with dyslexic students and students with language issues, we would always have them set up an organized notebook and keep materials and have a system. of handouts and keeping their homework straight, and some of those students had challenges with organization. But we did focus a lot on language remediation or supporting language development. We did have a range of students who were, we sometimes use the term expressive language students who really had language deficits, to fairly verbal students who had just some gaps here and there. But then when we started seeing more, or maybe identifying more, the issues of attention deficit and executive functioning issues, organization became even more important, and I think more of a challenge to really have students succeed with using those structures. It just, the whole 23 years I've been here have been just more opportunities to learn and learn and learn. I felt like I really got a lot of knowledge about language processing and auditory and different inputs and reading and spelling and sentence structures, and then in the 90s we started working more on executive functioning and all the issues with attention and memory and so on, and motivation. And so we really developed a whole another area of knowledge. And then more recently we've been talking about universal design. What works? Here's a menu of options that everybody can choose from. And so I think it has become more challenging to teach. And then recently we've had more and more students, we still have a small group, but more students with nonverbal learning issues and social interaction issues. And even in the old days we had a sort of a socially oriented, pragmatic
Right.
speech class or communications class. But now we have this other diagnosis, people on the autism spectrum, and that provides additional challenges. I find myself going to the library and checking out a book on how to classroom management for such students. So it is hard to keep everyone engaged all the time, and to for example, the laptop issue, it's a great tool for students to keep organized and take notes, but it's really, really difficult with students with the attentional issues to keep them taking notes and not doing Facebook or something like that. So it is hard when you're trying to, you have some students with some comprehension issues, or other issues that you're trying to break some things down for, and then you have students who are very quick and understand the reading, but just are having trouble organizing or sitting themselves down to write the paper. So.
Well, I don't know, again, a quick way to answer that. I guess one of the things to do, which happens in communication classes, and I'm sure it happens across the campus, is to do group activities. And you mentioned the students with some social issues here, or etiquette type of thing. I mean, actually, we see that that's harder. Actually, it's a disadvantage for them. For the other kind of profiles we have, putting them together in a group allows strengths possibly to mesh and to grow, to support each other. Maybe someone who's someone's a stronger reader, or is working well with someone who's not such a good, strong reader. But it's a complicating factor now that I'm aware of some students in my class who have a profile that where group work is counterproductive. Mm-hmm. And so then having to find alternative assignments. You mentioned universal design, trying to present both, which most people first grab onto as a kind of a multimodal thing, which is earlier kind of language for that, where you present material on different through different channels, seeing and hearing and touching and things like that. Experiential learning is part of that, and just to make a kind of connect the study abroad, we've often found those kind of experiential opportunities where you're out in the field and really having a chance to, see something and encounter it yourself, and then come back to reflect upon it. Really powerful.
Well, I'll talk about study abroad because I think that's very exciting. And that started in the kind of mid to late 90s, I think. But we've had programs in London. We've had programs in Greece and even in India and Italy, France, Ireland, Costa Rica and Chile, and I think I've got them all now, right? I think I've touched on them all. But students really have profound experiences on those programs, and it is true, yes, true experiential learning, really holistic learning, because they're learning about another culture and also about themselves and how they react to another culture and to other people. And talk about a social learning opportunity and an opportunity for communication. Sometimes we have our courses are focused on art history or the culture, or even literature, or some topic for which they're getting academic credits, but the non-classroom time, when they're communicating with each other, with people in the culture, are just really valuable as well. And when I've done study abroad in Greece several times, and we read ancient plays in ancient amphitheaters, and you really can't get any closer to the experience than that. And our students, we've always read literature and noticed that with the diverse learning profiles, you're going to have a lot of students who may not learn as well in a classroom as they do hands-on or visually or through experience. And so it's been a great opportunity for that kind of learning.
I find that something a difficult challenge, difficult question to answer as well. And my responses may seem a little odd, but it would be that what's happened in the last 10 years is that we survived. And what I mean is that from an external perspective, I think the college has gone through a lot of important growth. In terms of facilities, in terms of numbers. So you could point to saying, we have a new gym, or we have a student center, we have this kind of program, and say those are all great things. But I think what's really important is how much the educational program and the faculty in particular have been able to manage some integrity and some spark within this period of really rapid growth and almost extraordinary demands. And the demands have been there since the beginning. I mean, we're working with a diverse set of students that are at risk at any other college. We're doing things that no other college professors are asked to do. And that with the type of changes that have occurred, for many of which for good reason, for sustainability and the kind of the financial health of the college, but faculty have had to deal with changing job descriptions, new responsibilities added into the things that they currently are doing and doing so well, larger class sizes, less contact time. It's actually quite remarkable how, it's quite remarkable how strong our faculty is, how adaptable, how resilient. That most faculty have been here for a long time. There's a real depth of experience here that is irreplaceable. I think many people may think that the financial health, the sustainability issues are the ones that is the most pressing kind of problem for the college, but I think that most of the faculty who've been here who have this depth of experience are on the latter half of their teaching career. And I think that's actually a real stealth problem that's going to be coming along as these faculty move off. It's how that Landmark gets to continue its uniqueness and this kind of the qualities that the current faculty have. How can they maintain that or even enhance that into the future? Well, it's the personal connection with the people I work with and with the students I work with. I mean, as I said at other places, other venues, I couldn't teach anywhere else after teaching here. There's nothing else like this. There's no other opportunity to be able to. I think people go into teaching because they're giving people, and you want to be able to make a difference in people's lives. And you can't always do that for every student you're working with, but you can do that, and in some profound ways here at Landmark, and as such an opportunity.
Well, the people, I guess the other faculty especially. I just am never tired of the people that I work with. I learn from them all the time. I learn how to be a better teacher, and they're just an incredible group of people, and it's a hard job, but it's also rewarding sometimes. And the students are fascinating, and a lot of good people, and just I just appreciate the opportunity to help people not always reach their potential, but at least work towards that. And for some of our students, it's a long struggle. But so I guess the challenge is important, but the challenge without the other faculty, the support of the faculty, my colleagues, would be, too hard. I have learned patience and learned to stop and think about why things might be not going so well for the student, why they aren't able to complete a homework assignment, or why are they having trouble with this particular passage in a book. Just really sitting back and analyzing. I mean, I'm an analytical person anyway, but rather than jumping to a solution or something, just having patience and waiting, maybe observing, gathering more information before I reach conclusions about how to help the student, or and giving them second chances, but having high standards at the same time, and that's a real challenge. But it's a sort of a negotiating style of teaching. I mean, you've got to set standards and hold people accountable, but you have to negotiate because there are reasons why the students can't always meet those goals, or at least in the way that you thought they would. And so trying to go back and support them so that they can reach goals, or maybe modify goals to make them more realistic.
I don't know if I can answer that as clearly as Jan has. I am just reminded of how human we all are when I deal with my students. And for me, in the end, as passionate as I can be about working here and committed I feel about it, it's still a job. So I have a good day, bad day. I go home and I have more life to live. Students here, good days and bad days, this is their life for many of them. They're often at a crossroads or a place of important growth, and it's a big deal. And I often, I guess, I'm humbled by that responsibility.
Sometimes I'm frightened by that responsibility.
Well, right.
Yeah, it seems pretty critical sometimes that I've got to help the student succeed, but sometimes they're not quite ready, or maybe the definition of success has to be modified, that at this time in their life.
Yeah. If someone had a certain physical handicap, if someone's blind, you wouldn't expect them to, you wouldn't give them a driver's license. Mm-hmm. But I always have a sense of hope that every student who comes into my classroom, and every time I encounter every day, that they may hit a roadblock, they may be stuck, but it doesn't mean they can't do it. Mm-hmm. And then what actually triggers me more than anything is when a student tells me they can't do it. I can't write this paper, I can't do this, and I'm like, we're going to make this happen. We'll find it. So I guess that sense of hope is important to me.
Yes, the funniest thing that ever happened in this room. We had a tradition of, it was a really intimate time in terms of the size of the school. It grew gradually, but in the earlier years, we would have a morning meeting in this room. All the faculty would assemble, and the administrators that were directly involved with academics. And Jim Bauckham would sit at the head of the table, because he was the academic dean. And so it was Christmas time, and every year somebody would get some mistletoe, and I don't remember if they hung it over his chair or they would hold it and sneak up behind him when he was talking about something like, how is such and such a student? And we would discuss students and how they were doing. It was such a small group of students. And he was serious, and someone would sneak up behind him and hold up the mistletoe and kiss him. And one year, I'm building up.
Right. Well, you have to remember, Jim is very serious.
Yes, he's
and
serious.
Comes across as a straight-laced guy.
Right, he's straight-laced and really competent person. I've learned a lot from him. But at any rate, once it was Diane, snuck up and kissed him, and everybody just laughed, and it was so, just great. And he would turn red and say something clever, or maybe not even, be speechless, be rendered speechless. One year, the second funniest time was when Sister Rita, a nun who was visiting for a time and was teaching here, kissed him. That was great. But the funniest time of all was when our colleague Sam Prescott, math teacher, and had a long ponytail, he still does, and was friends with Jim from the Landmark School, and he snuck up and really planted a good kiss on Jim. So
I'm picturing that too.
I was
there too.
It was just a moment of hysteria for everyone. But Jim's line was, "I know where your family lives," or "I know where you live." So it was great. There was no way to regain composure after that moment.